Hi, I'm Matthew Schwartz with Information Security Media Group, coming to you from RSA. And it's my pleasure to welcome to the ISMG studio, Bryan Ware, CEO of LookingGlass Cyber Solutions. Bryan, great to be back in person at RSA.
I'm glad to be here. I wish I had as much energy as you do, but mine is a little drained already.
I may have had fewer meetings than you have had.
Or more coffee.
Or more coffee, that's always possible. Also, I have to be honest, when it comes to threat intelligence, I get excited. I think it's a good topic, which leads me to my first question for you. We've seen a lot of really high profile, devastating in some cases, cyber incidents. What are we learning about adversaries and how they operate?
I think the things that we're learning maybe aren't new. They're just happening in ways that are a lot more visible than they used to, and that's driven by everything being internet connected, all the digital transformation, all the leveraging of cloud services, just the explosion of stuff connected to the internet. The adversaries, for as long as they can get away with it, are going to use the least common denominator, the easiest tools. They don't have to burn a whole lot of new and fancy stuff. I mean, there's certainly been the sunburst campaign, the solar winds incident, very, very sophisticated. But in contrast, a number of the things that are happening in the ransomware space leverage vulnerabilities that are very old, well-known, just systems that are unpatched and connected to the internet that make it easy for them to do what they're doing. It's just that the exposure, the consequence seems higher and higher, and it's very visible. It's on the front page of newspapers now. It didn't used to be.
As you say, the exposure, the consequence is higher and higher, whether it's a massive supply chain attack or whether it's a ransomware incident that crypto locks one's organization. You never want to be at the receiving end of that.
Right.
So, we know about the importance of incorporating threat intelligence into an overall defensive strategy. What are some of the errors that you see organizations making when they're attempting to gather and interpret the intelligence?
Well, it's hard. I would say that trying to collect your own threat intel and using that word to mean the intelligence of what adversaries are doing and what they're engaged in, there are products and solutions that are out there. So hopefully we're seeing less organizations that are doing that on their own. But even in those products, many of the products that are on the market that are available are sometimes hard to interpret. They can sometimes generate a lot of false positives, at least in the sense of, should I pay attention to this or not? And so I don't know that those are so much errors or even defects in the software. It's just part of what's hard about knowing which threat intelligence is important to me and that I should focus on is, it's a challenging problem. And that's one that I think, more than like acquiring threat intel, I think the real challenge, the real trick is figuring out how to get it in a way that you can use it and drive your operations.
So, what's your advice? How should organizations, how should security teams and security leaders be gathering the right insights, ensuring they're getting the right insights?
Yeah, and I think it happens at multiple levels. At the very lowest level, the degree to which that intelligence is integrated within your operating platforms, so that it's driving directly into your, all of your security fabric on a machine scale, is incredibly important. And then kind of up a level where you've got analysts that are in your SOC or analysts that are trying to understand the exposure to the organization. Just being mindful to use that threat intelligence, not just to be better informed, yes, that's important, but to contextualize it against your organization's attack surface or your vendor ecosystem's attack surface, your third-party suppliers. And then, of course, there's a different, requirement and need evolving for executives to also understand the threat intelligence. These are very different kinds of products. Can all be the same product, but they have to, and all based on the same data, but really speaking to different machine level, hard, analyst level, and then the executive level.
Executive level. So not threat intelligence for threat intelligence's sake.
Correct.
But what are you doing with it? How are you making it more actionable,
right,
more usable, more relevant? As you say, also for CEOs and business leaders. So what are some of the strategies or best practices that organizations should be employing as they're attempting to gather, use, perhaps tailor threat intelligence so that CEOs and their ilk can make better, more informed decisions when it comes to business risk?
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing that I'm seeing happening in our industry right now is that because of what we were talking about before, the the exposure and impact that cyber incidents have that have now put them on the front page and on the headline news means that these are not just technical risks that can be understood by technical people, somewhere deep in the bowels of the organization, but they're business risks, they're business issues, and boards and CEOs should be asking questions like, what could go wrong? How likely is that to happen? How bad would it be? How prepared for it are we? What are we doing? And then getting the information, the threat context that helps them to understand, what that means to them. And I'd say that what should be obvious to all of us after the last several months is that if there are increasing geopolitical tensions, then there may be impacts to your business. If what we've seen in this Russia-Ukraine conflict is that if the Russians are targeting the energy utilities, the energy companies in the Ukraine, that can spill over on a global basis. So understanding the threat that your company has because of other similar, peer organizations, other organizations in your sector, the activities that those adversaries are likely to engage in, and then again, even as an executive, how could that impact us? And how vulnerable are we to that? And are we taking the right measures budget-wise, all the way down to getting ready for incident response or whatever?
So, in terms of making this work, helping address these requirements, how does LookingGlass help security teams leverage the adversarial perspective that we've been discussing to understand what would be or what are the weak points in their attack surface?
So maybe like pulling all of this conversation together, what we do on a technical level is we are gathering that adversary threat intelligence. What are they doing? What are their capabilities? What are they targeting? At the very earliest stages of an actor seeking to gain access to company X, or an asset trying to sell accesses to company X in the dark web. So those are the very earliest indicators, all the way through their tactics and their setting up their command and control infrastructure and so forth. So we're tracking all that on the threat intelligence side. But the other thing we're doing is looking at the attack surface. What does your company look like from the internet? What do you look like to an adversary? Those adversaries, as we talked about before, oftentimes exploiting old vulnerabilities and sometimes some new ones. And so seeing where that adversary's interest intersects with your vulnerabilities so that you can prioritize reducing those vulnerabilities very, very quickly. And then a new thing that we're doing to address your last question is we're starting to produce an executive level report. It's going to take us some time to get this right, but we want to speak above the CISO's level to say these are some of the trends that are happening across industry and with certain adversaries, to try to get executives asking the right questions of their security operations team, of their CISO. So hopefully we get that kind of top to bottom connectivity between the business risks and the business posture, and by the way, the financial and other support for the cybersecurity mission, top to bottom.
Mm-hmm. So you're prompting CEOs, basically helping enable them to be able to, I guess everyone needs to speak the right language,
Yep.
But the more that they can be aware of what some of the challenges to the business might be, what some of the risks that they're facing are, the better they can, I guess, motivate the team, ensure things are on the right trajectory.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, education and awareness are part of just having better informed customers, better informed questions, better informed decision makers. I think we can play a role there. And I think that there's a conception amongst many that are not kind of deeply in the cybersecurity industry that it's always whack-a-mole out there, that anyone could get hit at any time. And while that is true to some degree, there are specific infrastructure sectors that are being targeted at specific times. There are specific actors looking for specific companies. And so being able to see that and prioritize and know how that might affect your business so that you can communicate to your customers or communicate with your shareholders or stakeholders and anticipate that, I think that's the goal that we're all driving for.
Well, and I mean, instead of cybersecurity being this big, scary sort of thing, as you say, knowing that there are certain things that are much more likely or potentially much more devastating, intersecting that, and then you don't have time to do everything, so you have to prioritize and marshal the forces accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, CISA, my last job was at CISA, they've been very vocal about the Shields Up campaign. The interesting thing about Shields Up, it's the right idea, but the question is, well, when do the shields go down? And the unfortunate answer is never. But there are times when the threat is much more targeted and much more specific. And I think executives at the highest level need to know when that's directed at them, and when they need to have kind of a higher level of attention and scrutiny because of the industries that they're involved in, or the geographies they're involved in, or just the state of the world.
The state of the world indeed. Well, Bryan, it's been a pleasure to talk threat intelligence with you today. Thanks so much for joining us here at RSA.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I've been speaking with Bryan Ware, CEO of LookingGlass Cyber Solutions. I'm Matthew Schwartz with ISMG, coming at you from RSA. Thank you for joining us.